Okay, so we're gonna have the QB and tight end rankings for week 2. We'll be going over the matchups and kind of why I have people ranked, and we're gonna start off with the QBs. All right, so starting off at number 1, I have Jayden Daniels. I know he didn't completely pop off last week. It wasn't really required against that Giants offense because they just couldn't score any points. So when it comes to Jayden, I think he's going to be number 1 overall this week, obviously. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game between them and Green Bay this week. It's actually today. I just think that you're going to end up seeing them have to score a lot of points on the Commander side of the field. I think it puts Jayden in a good spot where he's going to be able to rush, pass, and score quite a few points this week. At number 2, nothing too crazy. It is going to be Josh Allen. When it comes to Josh Allen, they're playing the Jets this week. The Steelers were able to pass the ball, run the ball all over them. So I'm anticipating we see the Bills be able to do the exact same thing. If Justin Fields and the Jets come out and score quite a few points like they did in week 1 and they are ready to go, this could be a very high-scoring game as well. If that ends up being the case, then Josh Allen's going to smash. Next is Lamar Jackson. Same thing. When it comes to Jayden, Josh, Lamar, these are just going to pretty much consistently be the top 3 or 4 guys every week. Next, I have Jalen Hurts. The biggest thing when it comes to Jalen Hurts, he does have a harder matchup from the running perspective against the Chiefs. Their pass defense did look a little bit worse than last year, so it's a little concerning for the Chiefs if you're a Chiefs fan. We'll see how it looks in week 2. I think you're just going to see Jalen Hurts pop off just like he did last week. At number 5, I have a bounce back guy. It is going to be none other than Joe Burrow. Going up against the Jaguars this week, it's not going to be the highest of scoring games, but Joe Burrow is going to pop off. I don't think the secondary or just that defense for the Jaguars is very good. I think he ends up returning to form, and he's a top 5 QB in week number 2. For my second tier of top 10 guys, at number 6, surprisingly super high, I have Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love's going to be, again, in a high-scoring matchup tonight on Thursday night against the Commanders. I do think both of these defenses are going to be adequate, obviously, but I think that the offenses are both very electric, so I'm going to have Jordan Love higher this week. If you don't want to start him, I completely understand if you have somebody you have more faith and trust in, but this is, again, going to be where my rankings are for Jordan Love in week 2. At number 6, Justin Fields, again, a lot higher than probably most people out there. In week 1, Justin Fields popped off. He looked like the guy I was hoping he was going to look like in week 1. Is that sustainable in week 2? Not 100% positive, but what I am positive about, it's a divisional rivalry game between the Jets and the Bills. The Bills gave up a bajillion yards in the air, on the ground, and they gave up a lot of points last week. I'm thinking that Justin Fields, if he looks like he did in week 1, he's definitely going to score as a top 10 quarterback in week 2. So next to number 8, I have Justin Herbert. For the last 3 guys, you could say like it's an overreaction, but I do think that we're going to get a similar taste of what we saw in week 1 in week 2. With Jordan Love, I love the matchup. With Justin Fields, I like the matchup and I like the talent. When it comes to Justin Herbert, the matchup against the Raiders is pretty optimal. Not going to be super high scoring, but if they come out and pass very similar, and if Harbaugh is like, hey, dude, this worked, and we smash the Chiefs, there's a real reality where he looks very, very good and is a top 10 quarterback in week 2. Again, with these last 3 guys, you don't have to start them in week 2. You could happily sit them on your bench and see what ends up happening in week 2. And then you could kind of move forward in week 3. It's probably a great idea. I'm just going to give it to you where I have them ranked in my rankings and what I'm expecting in week 2. Again, fantasy football truthers. At number 9, I have Kyler Murray. He's going up against the Panthers this week. It's basically the matchup. Last season he played against Panthers. He had 20 points. I'm anticipating we see at least a 20-point game from Kyler Murray in week 2. Didn't look that great in week 1. Don't really care, though, because the Panthers defense is going to be so bad, I believe, this season. So I just think you end up seeing him as a top 10 guy this week. Next, at number 10, I have Patrick Mahomes going up against the Eagles. Not a fun matchup, but I do know Super Bowl rematch, it is going to be a big deal and a big game for him and Andy Reid. Not saying that he's going to completely dominate in the passing game, but if he rushes as much as he did last week against the Eagles and gives Jalen Hurts a taste of his own medicine running the ball at the quarterback position, I think that there's a real reality where he finishes as a top 10 quarterback in week 2. At number 11, I have Bo Nix going up against the Colts. Colts defense could be really good, or it could just be that the Dolphins just really are that bad. We're not really going to know until we get a little bit farther into week 2 or week 3. But I think Bo Nix is going to bounce back. Sean Payton is not going to have him out there looking like that again in week 2. So I got to safely put him in my top 12 as a QB1. From there, I have Baker Mayfield. The matchup for Baker is not going to be quite as ideal, but it's still hard to have him outside of a QB1 any given week. He is going up against the Texans. Their secondary didn't look too great. against the Rams, but it wasn't too bad either. So we'll see if they make any adjustments. This may not be the craziest of high scoring games, but if the focus in week 2 is for the Texans to get that offensive going, get Nico Collins involved early and often, and it ends up being a slightly higher or medial scoring game, even if he doesn't score a lot of touchdowns through the air, I could see him just throwing the ball for quite a few yards and rushing quite a bit as well. So, and it's hard to put him outside of my top 12. At QB 13, I have Dak Prescott. He is going up against the New York Giants this week. It's probably not going to be the craziest of high-scoring games, only because the Giants' offense looked super stagnant in week 1. We'll see if they bounce back at all in week 2. Who knows? Maybe Jackson Dart plays because Russell looks so bad and they pop off a little bit, and then it is a higher-scoring game. Who knows? The biggest thing, though, is that the Giants defense didn't look that great in their secondary. Their pass rush is going to be really good, so Dak's going to have to get the ball out quick. But I think that there's going to be a huge focus on getting the ball to CeeDee Lamb to redeem himself from week 1 in those drops. And they're going to make sure that they're getting George Pickens involved in week 2. I think that Jack's going to pop off in week 2 and have a really good week. Obviously, he's right outside of my QB1 range. So at QB 14, I have Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams in week 1 didn't look too bad through the first, half quarter. He was okay. He didn't look too bad. It wasn't horrible. I think he's going to bounce back in week 2. Ben Johnson's going to kick his butt in practice this week. He's going to play a lot better. It won't be against a Brian Flores defense this week, so that'll be a big, big advantage for him. The Lions defense probably won't play as bad as it did in week 1, but I still don't think it's going to be as good as the Vikings defense is going to be this season. Caleb obviously did have a rushing touchdown, so that did kind of bump him up last week. So we'll see how it looks in week 2. So he's not in my QB1 range of outcomes, but he is on that fringe. So if you need somebody to plug and play, he's not a bad option either. From there at QB 15, I have Aaron Rodgers. Didn't even make an Aaron Rodgers thumbnail to start the season because I didn't think he was going to look this good. Again, the Jets defense was god-awful, so it probably won't be that bad in week 2. It's hard to have him outside of my top 15 in week 2 only because of how well he performed in week 1. Okay, so now that we're definitively outside of what should be a starting QB in week 2, I'm just going to run through these next handful of guys. Again, it's not going to be the perfect ranking. It's probably more for super flex, or maybe if you had Brock Purdy, maybe you need to fill in with somebody. So I want to make sure I go through these as well. Next, I have Michael Penix Jr. He looked really good. I think he's going to keep on looking really good. I think this pass game is going to be great. If Drake London's back in, no concerns, no worries. He's going to be a smash play this week. Daniel Jones, I do have, a little bit lower than a lot of people out there. Wasn't that crazy high on him going into the season. I don't like that they played against a horrible defense in the Dolphins, at least what I consider to be a horrible defense, at least in week 1. They're going up against the Broncos, so quell your hype. Is Drake May. Drake May didn't look that great in week 1. I'm hoping against the horrible Dolphins defense, he bounces back in week 2. I am anticipating that he does play better. And again, the defensive matchup is a smash play. Next for me, I have Jared Goff. I anticipate he's going to bounce back in week 2. Next for me is Trevor Lawrence. Didn't, again, look that great in week 1 either, but I'm anticipating based on the matchup, he's going to play pretty well. JJ McCarthy's the next one for me. Still don't really know what I feel about JJ McCarthy, but we'll see how it looks as the season goes along. Then I have Sam Darnold, Matt Stafford, Cam Ward. Again, these are more like super flex, 2 QB leagues where these actually matter. So these will be a little bit tighter as we go throughout the season, and it'll be a little bit more definitively correct, minus injuries or crazy game scripts changing going forward throughout the season. So next for you guys, I have my tight end rankings and tiers. So we're going to hop right into it. Tight end number 1, it is going to be Brock Bowers. The knee injury is a little concerning, but it looks like he's going to play in week 2. He's still going to be in a smash spot every single week. It's going to be him and Trey McBride, maybe Tyler Warren eventually vying for the number 1, number 2, or number 3 spot every single week. It's not anything too crazy. At number 2, I have Trey McBride. He could end up finishing more as the tight end 3, 4, or 5, only because the Panthers are going to give up a lot of rushing yards to James Conner and Trey Benson. But he's still the number 1 target earner for Kyler Murray, so it's hard to have him outside of my top 3 in week 2. Again, he could fall a little bit, but he's still going to be a top 5 guy no matter what in week 2 at the tight end position. So at number 3, I have Sam Laporta. I know it's probably going to be a little bit higher than other people have him out there. I think the Lions are going to bounce back more in week 2. You're going to see more usage of Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs. And it's going to be even more efficient than it was in week 1. Easily for me, a top 3 guy, top 5 guy. Again, he could fall just like Trey McBride could fall a little bit, but they're both going to be top 5 guys in week 2 by my estimation. At number 4, he could have been number 3. It is Tyler Warren. He looked absolutely fantastic in week 1. It was kind of everything I was hoping I was going to see out of him this season. Hopefully that continues in week 2. I know it's kind of a spicy ranking to have him this high. The Broncos defense is going to be pretty good, but they have so much wide receiver talent on this team. I think he's going to end up kind of getting lost in the sauce and forgotten about in week 2. So I think it's a potential to pop off if some of these corner safety matchups against these wide receivers are losing and he has to be more of a primary target and focus in week 2. So next for me at number 5, it is going to be Kyle Pitts. I know it's kind of spicy to have him this high, but I'm again just truth or right. I think you're going to see that the Vikings defense is going to play better in week 2. I think you're going to see them stop the run more like they did last season and what we kind of saw a little bit of in week 1. Kyle Pitts without Darnell Mooney out there is like the number 2 target earner on this team basically. So he's going to pretty much be viable as a top 10 guy as far as I'm concerned until we see Darnell Mooney get back on the field and see how the splits work at that point in time. So at number 6, I have Travis Kelce. It's kind of like who's Patrick Mahomes going to throw the football to in week 2? Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Travis Kelce. That's pretty much it. I don't expect Xavier Worthy to play, so Travis Kelce is going to get a decent amount of targets this week. The other big thing to keep in mind is when it comes to the Eagles, they could score a lot of points. They could score very little points. I don't know what we're necessarily going to see out of the offense in week 2 for the Eagles, but if it ends up being kind of a shootout game, Travis Kelce will pop off and be a top 10 tight end easy all week. Next for me is Jonnu Smith. I'm sure I have him a little bit higher than other people out there. I have a little bit of faith that he's going to continue to look good for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. He could be more of like the 2A or 2B option in the passing game. I did like the little jet sweep they ran with him in week 1 against the Jets. I don't think the run game for Pittsburgh is going to be very effective against that Seahawks front 4, so I think he's going to be decently involved in the pass game. And again, if it ends up being a higher to middle scoring game, I think he'll have a pretty good week and again be a top 10 guy. So next for me, I have TJ Hawkinson. He's a little bit higher, I'm sure, than consensus, but I really didn't like the usage for any of the players with JJ McCarthy in week 1. So we'll see how it goes in week 2. I think the Falcons defense is not going to be fantastic this year. They were able to be exploited through the air in week 1 by the Bucks. So I'm hoping that TJ Hawkinson has the opportunity to be the number 2 target earner for the Vikings in week 2. Next for me is kind of a safety pick. Again, I don't really like hedging my bets, but I have David Njoku and Harold Fannin like back to back. It could be that in week 2, David Njoku pops off and kind of returns to form playing with Joe Flacco. But if the Harold Fannin usage, targets, moving all over the field stays the same and he's this involved in the offense in week 2, he's going to go up my rankings dramatically because there's a reality where Harold Fannin is the number 1 tight end on this team. Joe Flacco likes throwing to the tight end. He was also checked down quite a bit. Again, in a PPR format, if he gets these amount of targets and receptions, he's going to be a safe play as a top 10 tight end every week. Kind of got to see what happens in week 2. It's why I didn't want to throw him way up in my rankings because I don't know what we're going to see. I don't want to overreact to week 1. The next for me is Mark Andrews. He just didn't get targeted in week 1, which is very suspect for me. I'm hoping that they're like, hey, we got to get this guy involved. We didn't win the game. We got to look at different options a little bit more so in week 2. So I'm hoping Mark Andrews emerges as the number 2 target earner for this team and gets a little bit of touchdown equity in week 2 as well. Next for me, I have Tucker Kraft and Zach Ertz, who are playing against each other this week back to back. I just think it's going to be a high scoring game for this Packers-Commanders game this Thursday. The biggest thing for both of these guys, they are going to be red zone threats and red zone target earners, which means touchdown equity is going to be attached to their name the entire season. They're both probably going to finish as fringe tight end 1s in fantasy football this year. Again, with the higher scoring game, I think it's pretty safe to start either one of these guys if you don't have an elite talent at the tight end position. From here, kind of just flying through it, because again, these aren't guys that I have as tight end 1s, but if you're needing to fill somebody in, maybe you had George Kittle and he's out, obviously. One of these guys is a decent enough fill-in option in week 2. Next, I have Evan Ingram. The matchup this week should be advantageous against the Colts. It's his second week with Bo Nix, so we'll see how it looks. I'm hoping that he plays a little bit better than he did in week 1. Next, I have Dalton Kincaid. He's attached to the Bills offense. It's going to be a top 5 to top 10 scoring offense, so he's going to have touchdown equity probably every single week. From there, it's Dallas Goedert, Jake Ferguson. Not my favorite options, but they are going to be decent target earners for their football teams. I do not have Juwan Johnson on this list, if you couldn't tell. I do not have faith in the talent. I don't like the tape. I did not like the talent or the tape last year. I am not going to put him in here until we get past week 2 or week 3, and if he's still a top 10 tight end every week, then he'll be on my ranking somewhere. So there are my QB and tight end rankings for week number 2. Hopefully this video helps you get just a little bit closer to winning your fantasy football championship in 2025. If you are looking to pick up some players, obviously the waiver wire has already passed, But if you want to see who I had on my waiver wire video, you want to see if anybody that I talked about is still available in your league, I would highly recommend checking that out and see if you can pick up one of those guys, because maybe, just maybe, one of them still available out there for you in your league. I'll see you guys again. No, hopefully you guys will see me again real soon. And until then, y'all have a blessed day. Bye.